Thank you very much. Well, we are very, very fortunate indeed to have Patrick Pouyanné here, who is the new president of Total. He was going to be here in a different capacity until, of course, the tragic accident struck Total early last week. Patrick Pouyanné has a brilliant career within the industry, within Total. I'm not going to read all this. You have it in your proceedings. He went through various sectors. The last one was Deputy Executive Vice President of Refining and Chemicals, a very difficult position to be in for a European company. And now, in the midst of all the kind of issues we have discussed the last 2 days, he has to run one of the biggest oil companies in the world. But he's very well prepared for it. If you read his biodata, he's gone through so many different parts of the company and has, like most of the French top, the brilliant education of the École Polytechnique, École des Mines. So without further ado, I think we will start with the questions, and Tom will start with the first question.
Thank you, Herman. Patrick, I think one of the questions that's on everyone's mind is how does one fill the shoes of Christophe Demargerie? It's no criticism of you, but it's obviously a big task.
Yeah, it's not an easy question. I think, first of all, what is important is that, and the company has demonstrated in the last weeks how strong we are. The board was able to take a decision in 1.5 days to put a new governance there, to reassure the employees, to reassure the markets, to unanimously ask me to take the job of CEO. And I have a good team with me. You know, when you face this type of situation, you have to be confident with the teams. The executive committee team around Christophe was very united. We are still there for most of them. My objective today, of course, is mainly continuity and stability. I just picked yesterday my new colleague in charge of refining and chemicals. There will be no other move for the time being. We just have a good executive committee with an upstream, Arnaud Broyac and Yves Carrère, with my CFO, Patrick de la Chevardière, with Philippe Boisseau on marketing and services, and now Philippe Soquet on refining and chemicals. And so with this team, with the support of the board, support of all the employees, you can tell you the feeling in the company in the last 8 days has been a big union sacrée, like we said. And I feel a strong support. I received many messages around from all over the world. And I'm convinced, and I think the outside world also has been quite impressed by the way we behave, the whole company. But we are even maybe will be stronger after such an event. In another way, of course, you don't replace Christophe. I will never try to replace Christophe. You know, I think I have to be as I am. I've been chosen to do the job, so I have to continue to behave as I am. Of course, I don't have any more the same responsibility, I can tell you. I know that I have today 100,000 persons around the world who are waiting for some guidance from me. But my main message today is we have a strong company, very united. We have a good strategy. We'll stick on it. And let's move on after these sad days.
Thank you.
You have inherited this job at a very difficult time. We have been discussing here the whole issue of cost controls, and now oil prices have come down sharply and could even fall further. How well positioned is Total to withstand a lower price environment? And what does this mean to capital spending and many of the large projects you are working on in this new environment? What will Total do to execute its strategic plan under these circumstances?
To be honest with you, I'm a little surprised by all these comments. The volatility in the oil market is not new. What was very new, it was very stable during 3 years, which was a big surprise. As if there was suddenly a $110 per barrel figure, which was somewhere as a, for sure. So I think there is a volatility. It's true that the slope of decreasing was quite sharp in the last month. But I think the reaction is on twofold. There is the short term and the long term. And we should not mix both. For me, a oil and gas company like Total, and the top management job is also to prepare the long term. The long term, because we have in a long-term industry, we invest billions of dollars for 25, 30 years. And you don't, by the way, you don't change the direction of the big tanker like that, you know. The tanker is already launched for many years in the last decisions. The impact that we can have, and I will come back on the short term, on the long term, you just move it slowly, you know. So on the long term, I think we still stick on our vision, which is that it's a huge task to be able to put into production the new 50 million barrels per day of new capacity, which will be required to meet the oil demand by 2030. It requires a huge investments. And when you look to various places around the world, you need $100 per barrel or plus to be able to do that. And so globally, on the long-term vision, we keep the long-term vision like it is, and we'll continue to behave with this vision. Then you have the short term. And the short term, my answer will be, and my experience in refining and chemicals from that point of view will help me, because there the volatility is not as low as it is on the upstream, you know. The volatility is a permanent volatility. You go from $40 per ton to $5 per ton in 1 month. And the answer for me is an industrial answer. You need to continue to focus on lowering your break-even point, which means controlling your costs, which was a crusade from Christophe, in order to be able to resist when in low tide, and when high tide returns, you will benefit of it. So our focus on the short term will be, and I think Total was at the forefront of the industry from that point of view, of course, to control, and what I've asked to my team, to the teams of Total for the coming budget session is give me the flexibilities that you have for next year. Which flexibilities could we have in terms of CapEx spendings? Of course, we have launched an OPEX savings program, so we'll continue, and we'll even be stronger on it. But at the same time, we should not jeopardize our strategy. Because I clearly think that one of the strengths of Total in the last 20 years and has been the capacity to continue to spend the money and to execute our strategy despite the volatility of the barrel. And because if you spend the money when the others stop, you could become stronger after that, you know. So for me, the answer is on short term, on costs. By the way, on short term also, Total will benefit from, we know we have many projects coming on stream next year and the year after, 10 huge projects. So we will have additional productions, which will give us additional cash flows. So I think, frankly, if there's one company who is well positioned to resist, we are the one. And I'm confident. And of course, we'll look carefully to the evolution of the market, but we say no panic. Yeah? We have, again, the big tanker is strong and solid.
Thank you. Okay. Patrick, you talked about, in terms of the oil market, you talked about the volatility, and that this is something we shouldn't be surprised about. But what is the outlook for the market? Are we in for a period of weakness and oversupply here, or is this just more volatility? Is this temporary?
No, I think clearly what happened recently, we can see that it's a question of anticipation. What happened is that many factors happened, by the way. It's a mix. You have better people in the room about the market. It's not one thing which could explain. On offer and demand, clearly what we can observe is that year after year, the real increase of demand is lower than the anticipation which was announced. So you have a sort of permanent, the real demand is lower than the anticipation. And then what happened is that the real offer is higher than the anticipation. Also, why? For some events, in particular, when the 600,000 or 800,000 barrels per day of Libya came on the market, it was not, they came suddenly in the market, and it created an additional offer. You can add the old shale story in the US, so you have an offer. But so that's something which is just happening. But you have also some more fundamental issues. And what I also think and believe is that when you observe the history of the oil price since 2000, OPEC has always been very able to maneuver properly. There is an important summit, I think, by end of the month. We'll see what will be decided there. And I'm confident that Saudi Arabia is able to take some right decision on that. You have some geopolitics which are frankly not very good. So it's a big surprise to see suddenly the price of the barrel going down at the time where the world is just everywhere. And you have plenty of locations in the world where you have some, I would say, difficulties. So all that makes that I think, I have the feeling that, but I don't want to predict anything. Christophe maybe was able to do it. I'm not able to do it. And I need more experience as a CEO to predict about the oil price.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is about Russia. I was at the 22nd Congress in Moscow, and your representative in Moscow gave a brilliant presentation on Total's activity in the Bazanov play, which may be the biggest tight oil play in the world. So Russia is a key country for Total, and thanks to a large extent to the efforts by Christophe de Margerie. What does the future look like now for Yamal LNG, the Bazanov tight oil, and other projects Total has planned for Russia?
I have two answers. The first one is that we are in Russia, that's true. You have a lot of oil and gas there. You have long-term reserves, and the world will need the development of the reserves to be able to meet the demand. The second one, the short term, the sanctions apply differently to various projects that we have. On Yamal LNG, we don't have any technical impact. We have some on the Bazhenov play. This Bazhenov play was the tight oil play, and obviously we cannot develop or explore this tight oil play without some technologies which are mastered in the Western world. But in the gas, technically in Yamal, it's fine. In terms of financing, it's harder because we cannot finance a project neither by US banks nor in US dollars. So we have to find other ideas. The euro maybe would be welcome. We'll use it more, and I'm a European, so why not? But it's clearly there is difficulty. The other answer maybe is just to pay a tribute to Christophe. I have there the last speech with me, which was given by Christophe in Moscow last Monday. He was attending a meeting with the Prime Minister of Russia in a forum between CEOs of various companies, and he delivered a speech, and I just want to read you what he said about Russia. It's probably a better answer than mine. It's quite long, so I will not read everything. We are against sanctions in general. I have said it time and again. You have heard it. And I have not made myself very popular in my country, as I am often accused of promoting our selfish interests. Actually, if I don't like sanctions, it's because I believe they are both unfair and productive. On the contrary, we are of the view that the political issues require political solutions, and that it's a failure of diplomacy when the only tools left are sanctions. But make no mistake, we respect sanctions that are applicable to us. We do not go against legality under no circumstances. Therefore, whether we like it or not, we'll abide by sanctions imposed by the EU against your country. We are against sanctions also because we believe that business is a force of good, for good, a channel for dialogue, and a way of improving mutual understanding. As such, and particularly in times of difficulties, it must be protected and encouraged. Today, it is a country business is held hostage by politics. So I took this position as mine.
Thank you very much.
Next question is about the downstream, and I wondered how, this is your area, but or one of your areas. But how do you see the outlook for the European downstream refining and petrochemical business with the kind of advantages that the U.S. has in terms of fuel costs and feedstock costs for petrochemicals?
The future is tough. It's really a very tough business in Europe. You have to be realistic. You have two different stories. On petrochemicals, clearly, petrochemical is quite an easy industry. It's a question of feedstock. because you have such a difference between the various feedstock in terms of costs, but even if you have the best naphtha plants of the world, you cannot compensate. And so clearly, the ethane in the US, you have plenty of ethane. All the chemical companies of the world today are just investing only in one part of the world, which is the US, which, by the way, will create a wave of polymers, and the markets will not resist like that. We'll see by the end of the decade. But it's a huge advantage. You know, you have a simple figure to keep in mind. A polymer produced in Texas and sent to Europe arrived in Europe at more or less $1,000 per ton. The same polymer in the best plant in Europe is produced at $1,400 per ton. You know, with such a difference, you find. So our strategy there for us will have been clearly to shut down the weakest crackers, and I have shut down 2 crackers in the last 2 years, and then to invest on the best integrated platforms in order to be among the best players, and to hope that we'll find a way to maintain our activity. But it's tough, because you face we are facing the competition from the Middle East, and now we have the US, and we are just there in the middle. And clearly our strategy with Christophe, because we want to maintain an industrial activity in Europe, is to bet and to focus our investments on the large integrated platforms that we have. And of course, as it was my strategy, it will continue. I hope so. For Philippe, it's okay. But he has the right to explain me something else, and to convince me. On refining, that's another issue. It's not only Europe who has a problem on refining, it's the world. You have a large overcapacities today of production of diesel and gasolines in the world, because we built everywhere in the world new refineries, especially in Asia, in the Middle East, on figures of anticipated demand which are not there. And so you have an overcapacity. You had another phenomenon, which is that instead of rationalizing the US capacities, you have more products coming out of the US. So you have 1 million barrels per day of products which were not anticipated coming from the US. And there you have a political issue, I would say, for Europe, which is the ban on exports in the US. Because the refining world in Asia, in Europe, is suffering of one rule, which is that the US cannot export oil. There is a transatlantic treaty discussion, and I hope that the European Commission has clearly understood that we need to fight to put this subject on the table. Because today, being a refiner in the US, you benefit from a huge advantage on the oil price, which maybe could diminish, by the way, with a lower barrel, because the elasticity is not the same in the US that on the Brent, on the WTI that on the Brent. But it's still an advantage, and there again, the advantage is very big. So it's the future for Europe. The demand in refining, you have less demand for petroleum products. You face this competition. You have another capacity already today of 10%, already existing, whatever the competition is. So obviously, you have to take decisions. And my view on that is that Total, we are, by the way, the largest refiner in Europe, is a leader, and we will have to take decisions, and we'll do them, respecting, of course, I would say, the social policy of the company and taking care of all our employees. But we cannot sustain plants who are losing more than 100 million euros per year of cash. It's not sustainable, and it's not responsible. We have to find futures with industries which can make money in Europe, and we'll have some ideas on it.
Next question is related to cost cutting. Total has succeeded in cutting costs sharply in the last year, and some of the projects in order to keep them economic and proceed. How was this done, and how much scope is there for further cuts?
Yeah, you were referring to the example of, I think, of a project Kaombo in Angola, but we had other examples, by the way. We had an example in UK called Edradour. In fact, what we've done is three ways. One is to try to think to the design of the projects. Our engineers are very, very smart, and when the oil price went up, they believe that everything is possible. All the best last techniques should be implemented in our projects. So we try to develop a concept and to tell them, no, please, do just enough, good enough design, We don't want to have overcapacities. We just want a good enough design for the purpose. Sometimes I'm saying to my colleague, when we want 100, we should ask them to design for 80, and we will have the 110, you will see. No, but it's an issue, and it's in our hand. And this is what is happening in our company. So that's part of our job. We have the architects, what we call architects. We need to put them pressure and to tell them, please, it's not because it's $100 per barrel, but you should not be reasonable. So that's the point. The second point, obviously, is to work on local content. We are in countries where we are, it's normal, but the countries are asking us to create more jobs by being able to construct part of the project locally, but it has a cost. And when it's reached, in our contracts, generally it says that up to 10% of additional costs we should accept. When it reaches 30% or 40%, it's becoming unreasonable. So I think, yes, we are for, and I am believing that we need to develop local capacities, and even in that some of the dollars that we spend for the project should have an impact on the local economies, but up to a certain point. And so that's the main ideas which were developed on Kaombo, which managed to save around $4 billion. And we try to do it again on that. And then the last thing, of course, is I think, like I said yesterday during my speech, is a discussion with service companies and contractors. We should not continue to try to oppose us to the others. In fact, in our business, clearly, we have a business model where, we design, we take the risk of investment, we finance, but we don't build ourselves. We have the project managers, the capacity, and there we have to have a clear, find a way to be able to be globally reasonable and to stop to have an inflation, permanent inflation in our industry, which, by the way, from that point of view, at $85 per barrel, it should help maybe to cool down this inflation.
Thank you. Next question is about Iraq. And, Total has operations in the south and in Kurdistan, and we also have the emergence of this Islamic State entity. And, the question naturally arises, well, what does this mean for your activity there in Iraq, and also what does it mean for the region as a whole?
I think, first of all, let's be clear. For me, one of my main concerns as a CEO is the safety and security of my employees. That's the first one. It's very important what I said, because for me, and I observe always, Christophe, when you send people all around the world in difficult places, you cannot expose their life because you want to develop oil or gas. It's not possible. So this is for us a permanent, I would say, we need to think permanently to that and to look to the situation. Secondly, on Iraq, we are not operating in the south of Iraq. PetroChina is operating for us. We are partnered with them. And our position on the contracts in Iraq. Total is born in Iraq. So it was impossible for Christophe to accept that we will not have a contract in Iraq, even if the contracts, honestly, were very bad, even more than bad. They were nothing. That's true. But, to take all these risks, it means we mobilize this finance. And so what we said by that time, we decided to find a partner, but we didn't want to mobilize human resources to put people on the ground in Iraq to take risks and to put our best engineers on a contract with low value. Does not make sense. We are just managing the scarcity of resources, financial and human people. This is our jobs. And we need to allocate them to where we can have the best interest for the company. In Kurdistan, honestly, the situation today is fine. We have people there. We are operating some exploration wells with some success. But of course, we carefully monitored the security, like in Yemen, like everywhere. And maybe there, from that point of view, even we do a lot. One of my colleagues of the executive committee is gone to Kurdistan 2 weeks ago at the request of Christophe to check himself if the situation was fine. So we sent one of my colleagues there to check if it's okay or no. So from the time being, we monitor it, and I'm really not worried. But it's a permanent monitoring. Yemen, from that point of view, is probably a little more difficult, to be honest, today, and with the situation there. But again, we can always encourage stability. And at the same time, because in Yemen, with the Yemen Energy Project, we have a project which delivers to the state 40% of the national budget, you know. We need to continue as long as we can, as long as it's possible, in line with our code of conduct in terms of security for our employees. So that's my point of view about that.
Well, turning from Iraq and Kurdistan to North America, in North America you are deeply committed to the Alberta tar sands. Now, of course, with a different different oil price scenario, it might be slightly different from what it was a few years ago. But at the same time, Total does not have a very big presence in the US shale plays. What is the reason for that?
But I'm sorry, it's not true. First of all, the change of scenario is not sure we don't change the scenario for the time being because we have 1 month of $85 per barrel first. Secondly, in fact, we have 2 projects in Canada, not plenty of them, because we canceled the others, and we stopped the others. So we have a mine project and we have a SAGD project, Surmont and Fort Hills, which are going on. And by the way, you know, when we decided this project, nobody was speaking about title. So there is something that we cannot do in the life, is to rewrite the story. You just have to assume the story, you know, the history. So these decisions were perfectly make sense 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Today, there is something else. So what we have done is that we had another mine. We decided to stop the project because it would have been difficult to justify another one. And in the US, we have 2 projects as well, one in the Barnett Shale and the other in Utica, where we spend quite a lot of money. The question then is, that's true that something is happening there. We are not against taking more position in the US. The question is to be pragmatic. The way we manage the company is very pragmatic, you know. Either we have good opportunities or no. What happened in the last year is that when you look to opportunities in the US, even if we've done 2 deals, it seems to us to be quite expensive, and for the time being. But it doesn't mean no. It means that we look at it permanently. There is another issue which is important in my eyes, it's a question of strategy. Even if we are a world company and we have the capacity to be all over the world, we can also think not to be smaller than our main competitor in their own field, which will be the case in the US. We are a small company there. And to become as efficient as our big competitors of Chevron, Exxon, maybe BP, I don't know, Shell, it's not easy. But I'm strong in other continents. We are strong in other continents. We are strong in Africa, for example. We are strong in the Middle East. So we can also have a strategy to continue to reinforce our advantage compared to the competitors. In Africa, for example, we are very strong in upstream and also in marketing. And a big network there of people, a big network of political connections, or people, the employees of Total, they know how to work in Africa, very well accepted. They like to do it. And our competitors, sometimes they do not like too much Africa. So we can continue to develop. It's a good fit. It's a continent where the population will increase, an economy which will rise in the future. So, but true that there is something has changed, which is the US shale miracle, I would say, which changed the landscape. So we made some acquisitions. And then again, if there is a good opportunity, we will look at it. But we will not do it just because we need to fill a hole. Okay? I don't want to act like that. By the way, it's interesting also to have an asset there, some assets to better understand what is happening. Because when you have an asset, you have real figures, you see the profitability, and you can take decisions with having a good knowledge of what is happening there, and it helps us from that point of view. So Canada projects are ongoing. We'll not stop them, you know. When you spend billions, you don't stop. And we'll see in the future, we'll be happy, I'm sure, to have these resources in Canada. You know, we have resources in Canada for 50 years. None of us will be there in 50 years, even if I'm young. But I'm sure our successor will be happy with this type. And it's important in our industry, when you read the company like Total, to think to a long-term future, like we think, for example, to the concession in Abu Dhabi.
Good. Well, thank you. The next question, Christophe Demargerie was very committed to dealing with climate change, and Total, under his leadership, made this big investment in solar. Meanwhile, most of the other major oil companies have retreated away from alternative energy. And the question is really, how do you see that evolving now in the future? Is this something that was
I'm very comfortable with the solar investment of Total. I know that people, there are some passion around it. You know, it's 1.5% of my capital employed. So we can speak a lot. Newspapers love to speak about solar, but it's by the way, it was considered as a mistake. Today it's a good investment. You will see. What I'm sure is that there again, there was another idea from Christophe. It's not just climate change and renewable. It's the idea that when you are a company like Total, you need to understand what is happening in the economics of energy. For example, when you're in the gas and solar, the common point is power. All that is designed to produce power. We produce gas, but in the end, it's power. So understand the power markets, and you can see in Europe, for example, you cannot today make forecasts on what will happen on the gas price in Europe if you don't understand what is happening in renewables in Germany or even the coal market, by the way. All that is interconnected. And then again, because we have this asset of SunPower, which is quite a very interesting company with a leading technology, we are looking carefully to where we can invest in solar and where we cannot invest. And we better understand the economics and the implications that it will have on the full chain of economics and energy. So from that point of view, I think SunPower as a technology is one of the leading companies in the world. They begin to make benefits. So let's stick on this strategy. Solar is very interesting from my point of view for another reason. It's a place where innovation could be very important. You know, 10 years ago, the knowledge in solar industry did not progress compared to 30 years ago. Now we begin to invest, and there is a big room for improvement by technology. And for a company like Total, being an industrial company of your size, finding new areas where you can invest in technology, in innovation, and prepare the future, I think is a good strategy. On climate change, I think, for me, I would say 2 words. The first duty for an oil and gas company is energy efficiency. And it should be, I think, the first duty for everybody. We speak a lot about carbon price, as if a carbon price will solve the issue. The best way to solve the issue is not to tackle, it's to try to avoid, to lower the emissions from the start, from the process point of view. And it has a cost. You know, we are in Total, we spend a lot of money in consuming energy. So energy efficiency is the first point. The second point, like Christophe said, is that we have to recognize, I think the industry has to recognize that there is a climate change story and that we are partly responsible for that. We cannot deny it. We are not credible if we deny it. So yes, we can and we agree and we'll sign soon the UN Compact Declaration about it's good to have a price of CO2 to establish a CO2 price. But there again, we need to be careful in Europe of which future do we want in Europe. If we set a price in Europe at a high level and that the other areas in the world, for example, the US and the refining, we just destroy the industry in Europe. A 25 euro per ton price of CO2 in Europe is equivalent to $2 per ton of refining margin at the end. $2 per ton where we are fighting to get 25 or 15 or, you know, it's just enormous. So we are clearly, I think we need to act. Christophe launched an initiative with Khaled El-Fali of Saudi Aramco to try to have a group of companies who will advocate for moving. I think it's a good idea. We will continue to work on that. But the message will be on twofold. Yes, you have an issue, but the world, and particular in our industries, in refining, petrochemicals, we need to have the equivalent rules among the various continents. Otherwise, there will be no more petrochemicals and refining in Europe. And it's not what we want. So we advocate and we fight against measures which are not reasonable in our views. And by the way, price of CO2 is not the only way to lower emissions, because the real target, again, is not to have a high price of CO2. The real target is to lower the emissions. And you have various ways to do it. And we have to put in place and to act with the most economical ways to do it, and not just to have there again a sort of we need to have a high price of CO2 just because somebody wants it. So what are the best ways to lower our emissions? Unfortunately, so you have, of course, like you said, gas is better than coal. And when I see that in Europe today we are developing coal again in Germany and we are shutting down gas plants, something is wrong. Something is totally wrong. And we should say it's wrong and stop this type of policy.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick. We're coming to the end of the session. We want to thank you again very, very much that 1 week in the job, you're willing to come here and share your views with us on Total and on your outlook on the industry. It was highly appreciated, and please, all of us, let us join.
I would just like to say a word. It was my first public appearance since I've taken the job. I've given no interview. It was the first time. If I've been able today to answer like I've done, it's thanks to Christophe and all the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.